So a couple things while I'm watching it. I mean, I got a list of questions. There's some of the questions I want to talk about that has to do with the movie. Some of it has to do with your career. You've been in this world for such a long time. Your brother's here with us, you know, in the back. He was performing for us in the back, singing, and he's
my brother Buddy.
My
little brother.
Yeah, which is fantastic. But some of it has to do with Hollywood. Some of it has to do with Reagan. Some of it has to do with you. Some of it has to do with politics. But for me, while you were doing this movie and you're making this movie, and you're seeing the similarities of some of the stuff that happened in the movie, assassination attempt makes it assassination attempt, right? He comes from the entertainment space. Trump comes from the entertainment space. President he went up against was Jimmy Carter. President he went up against was, you know, Joe Biden. While you're going through this, are you in the moment saying this is a bigger movie that everybody today has to see, to go back and say the case study of Trump is possibly Ronald Reagan?
Well, it's the times are very similar to what they were back in '78, in the late '70s, '79. We had hostages over in Iran, you know, and today nobody talks about it. But what about the hostages that are over in the Middle East right now that Hamas is holding? Nobody ever talks about it. You know, Reagan came into office, the hostages were released 20 minutes after he got into office, and because they didn't want to deal with him, because he was, you know, they believed 80% that he might do something, I think. And then, you know, you had oil was a big thing. You know, the gas prices were high. The interest rates back then were 20%. I know, because I actually bought a house then. So what was I thinking?
How much was the house?
I'm still paying for it.
How much was the house? How much was the house you bought back then?
I was building a house in Montana, and well, I had to actually, you know, I didn't declare bankruptcy, but I, you know, paid the loan off. But it just got sky high. Was what, and you know, it was very similar times. And Jimmy Carter had given that speech about how that we were going through a period of malaise, if you'll remember, and. You know, America was a nation in decline. Its time was done. And Reagan came along and said, no, we're not. He told us that we were a shining city on a hill, and that the best times for America were in the future. And we were going to create everything that was going to take us there. And he did.
Now, when you go back there, Dennis, were you somebody who voted for him? Because in the past, you said you didn't. Yes. So you voted for Reagan in...
Yeah, I also voted for Jimmy Carter. I voted for Jimmy Carter. I'm an independent, by the way. I've always been. I voted both ways according to what I thought, you know, the pendulum swings this way and what we need. But I voted for Jimmy Carter. But, you know, it was after Watergate. It was he was an outsider. But, you know, he didn't work out too well when it came to that. And, but Reagan, I'd been a fan of Reagan, I mean, since I was a kid. Was in 1964, Reagan was giving the speech. He was stumping for Goldwater. And my dad and I were in the car on the way down to Galveston from Houston. That's where I'm from. My dad was like hitting the dashboard, you know. He loved Reagan. And that's the first time I had noticed Reagan as a political figure. He was the guy that sold Baraxo soap on Death Valley days on TV, you know. And
this is when you worked for GE?
I did, but then I did vote for Reagan in 1980. And I came home, I was in LA, and I came home, I had a roommate, and he said, who'd you vote for? I said, Reagan. He said, you were kicked out of the hippies. So I turned in my card, and that was that.
So how long would you say you've been in the entertainment business? If you were to say, you know, I started in 19, what would you say was
Well, I moved to LA in 75.
Okay, so
1975.
so 75. Who is
Yeah.
the biggest star in Hollywood in 75?
Jack Nicholson.
So Jack, and you named your son
Yeah.
after Jack.
Ryan
if I'm-
O'Neal, I think, was the biggest. Actually, the biggest box office at that time was Chris Christopherson. Everybody forgets that about him. He was the biggest box office star 3 years in a row. But it was Jack Nicholson. It was, it was that time in the 70s. We had an anti-heroes, rebel heroes going on. It was a kind of really golden age in movies back then, because the studios had really kind of lost touch with their audience and did this French New Wave thing, like starting with Bonnie and Clyde, and The Godfather, and there was a lot of great movies back then.
How different
Great
is
time
it?
to come out to LA.
What's been the evolution from 75 to 2024 to date in Hollywood?
In Hollywood? Well, the 70s was like the decade of the director, and then I think the 80s really became the decade and a half or whatever of the movie stars again, and then it became the agencies who really kind of ran things and packaged deals, and now I tell you the truth, and then along came streaming. I don't know what it is anymore, and I don't think I think we're right back again. That fits the times of back then. That Hollywood has lost touch with its audience. They used to make each studio. There'd be like 5 major studios. They would make at least 40 films a year, and that would be from the spectrum to the blockbusters down to smaller movies. And now I think 8 to 10 each. And they got to be blockbusters. They got to be big tentpole movies. And so film is kind of up in the air.
Maybe this is a weird question to ask you on film 75 versus today in Hollywood, because I went a little bit deeper when they came out saying if you want to win an Oscar right now, you need to have a third of the people working on the set being part of the underrepresented community. A third of actors need to be this. A third of directors need to be this. One of the key roles need to be this, whether it's black, Hispanic, disability, all this stuff that they've done. If you don't do this, you will not be nominated for a movie. So some of the biggest Oscar award-winning movies of all time, that won't happen. That part of it for us as the viewers, as the fans that want to go watch a movie, when did you see the tipping point about how that happened, and how do you feel about it?
Well, it's as far as the Oscars, it's always been political, and it's always been skewed left. I would think, and but they did give John Wayne a Best Actor award back then, and but it's always been skewed to the left, and but recently with all these things that you've got to have in films, otherwise you got to have. There's a loss of freedom of expression, I think, has been lost in filmmaking with a voice, because everybody's trying to be so politically correct. Back in the 70s, it may have been skewed left, but everybody was trying to be politically incorrect back then. That was the thing, and it was an exciting time, actually. And that's the way you have a real dialogue with people instead of trying to fit into a mold.
So the skewed left. One time, one of my guys, his ex-wife, and he's sitting there. We're in Woodland Hills in my office. We're having this conversation, and she is a diehard AOC fan. And she's telling us how amazing AOC is. And then I'm listening to her, and I asked her, I said, let me ask you, how good were you? What was your favorite subject in high school? She said, oh, English. I said, what subject did you hate the most? She says, I couldn't stand math. I said, got it. I said, how much do you think not liking math has to do with which way you vote politically? So she said, I never thought about it that way before. I said, because if you like math and you understand the basics of math, you'll understand that capitalism works. It's a great model to have. And even later on, by the way, as weird as this sounds, so later on, we did research here to find out of school teachers in America, different types of school teachers, what they they vote for, left or right. English teachers, 98 out of 100 English teachers vote for the left. Art, vote for the left. All of these things, you go 97, 98, 99. There was only one of them where that 98 dropped to 83, and that was math. So if somebody was a math teacher or a physics teacher, 13% of them would vote for conservatives.